Hello, I am Joseph, the moral philosopher. Today we are going to discuss the capture of Maduro. This is a recent event, a somewhat shocking and surprising event for most people. So we're going to discuss, did Trump do the right thing? Was Maduro an innocent good guy? Was he a bad guy? We're gonna get to this. Okay, let's set a couple things as assumptions that may or may not be true. For the sake of the video, we're going to assume they are true. I think they likely are, but I have not seen that evidence with my own eyes, and I'm just going off of what I have heard, and that could be wrong. Okay, so let's set the assumption that Maduro, as the leader of Venezuela, has been facilitating um, the transportation of drugs from Venezuela, or from where, let's say at least Venezuela, to America, and those drugs are being used in a way where Americans are being killed. Okay? Let's assume that is true. I think it is. If I'm wrong, then that changes that doesn't change the determination of the morality if that is true. So we can use it as a hypothetical, even if that's not true, but we're going to assume that it is for the sake of this video. Great. We have two motives from him, okay? So let's talk about the morality on his aspect first. Motive number one, selfishness. He doesn't care if other people get hurt from his drugs, because it is a benefit to him in some way. Okay? The second motive, viceful motives, these both be immoralities. The second motive would be malevolence. He actually intends for the death of Americans, and him being him benefiting in some other way is just a bonus. Okay, so those are the two things. Now, he could want both of those things. He could only want one of those things and just not care about the other, be ambivalent towards it. Okay, but those are the two motivating factors, right? He benefits either, or he does harm that he desires. Okay, so what is justice for that? Okay, let's discuss justice in general. Okay, justice morally, not legally, but moral justice is going to be stopping somebody from doing harm and preventing them from doing further harm. Ideally, justice is always going to be done with mercy. That means you're going to use the least amount of force, but you are going to use as much force necessary in order to make sure that people are safe, essentially, that life is preserved. Okay. So, what have we been doing to Venezuela? Now, we also have to, okay, let's make another little point here. The motive for this may not only be about drugs. Okay, the motive can also be more wide scale politically. One, it can be oil. That's been pretty clear. Okay, so for example, there's the accusation. I think this is true. This is a true statement. Okay, that Venezuela nationalized their oil production. Okay. American companies had invested into those oil companies, and they did not get a return. They didn't get the return on their investments because Venezuela says, no, this is our oil, and we're keeping it, and you don't get anything for it. So essentially that is a form of theft, right? They took something that they didn't earn. So rightfully they should have paid off that investment, and then if they wanted to nationalize, they could do that. But otherwise, it's a form of theft, which is immoral because it hurts the people who invested. Okay, whether you care about corporations or not, corporations are made of people, so there are people that will be harmed from that, right? Americans might have lost jobs and not been able to pay rent or feed their families because the companies that invested might have laid people off. So there's harm from theft. Okay, so The other thing is on a global scale, it's where is that oil going? So from the American perspective, that oil is being sold to American rivals or enemies, namely China. Okay, so there is the potential for war in this world. That is just always a thing when you have multiple countries kind of vying for a leadership position in essentially global dominance, either influence or through force. Okay, and so that's America and China right now, right? So Venezuela is selling oil to China. So one of the motivating factors, besides the drug thing, is that they are funding China, and presumably the Trump administration has information about potential actions that might be taken by China that would put, that for whatever reason we don't want, could put Americans in danger. Okay, so it could be a safety concern. So for those enumerated reasons here, Venezuela is hurting Americans or doing things that will hurt Americans. So the reaction to that should be justice. You stop somebody from hurting you. You stop them from doing further harm. Okay, so how do we do that? The least amount of force necessary. What is that? That's going to be diplomacy. You say, hey, don't do that. Well, you know what? Maduro and the people who, it wasn't Maduro who nationalized the oil. This happened before he was in power. Okay. But you say, hey, don't do that. And he says, yeah, I'm going to do it anyways. Okay. Well, so that was the minimum amount of force we could try to use to stop us from being harmed. It was ineffective. What else can we do? Let's say economic. We can put tariffs on them. We can put sanctions on them. Say, you know, if you sell, we're not going to trade to you. You're not going to get our benefits if you're doing these things. And sometimes that works. It depends. If they're selling to China and not American, we say, hey, you know what? We're going to put tariffs on you, for example. They say, yeah, we don't care. We're just going to sell to China, so it doesn't matter. So economic persuasion, that's not the right word, but we'll use it. Trying to use economics to influence the harm that is happening to us, to prevent that, is not effective. So, okay, what else can we do? We could say, well, turn yourself over, we're going to lock you up. That's not going to go well. Of course, he said, you know what, come get me. And so Trump did that. In a very surprising manner, a very effective show of force. They went in, and in a half an hour, American troops took Maduro out of his house and brought him to New York to stand trial, particularly for the drug-related charges. That's why I opened with that. So, the question is, was that the moral thing to do? Well, I kind of laid it out already, that justice is moral because justice prevents harm to other people, and it stops harm and it prevents further harm. Does arresting Maduro stop that from happening? Potentially, yes. Because of two things. One, if he's in charge and he's saying, yeah, you guys do this, and then we're like, no, we're going to take you. You're not in charge anymore. We kind of cut off the head of the snake there. The next leader, the vice president who takes over, can say, you know what, we're going to keep doing that. And you know what, we could just do it again. We was already bombing boats, right? So there are boats bringing drugs to the country, and America's been bombing them. Now, minimum necessary force. Is that the force necessary? Would it have been better to arrest them? Yeah, probably. Could you say, hey, if you come here and try to kill Americans with drugs, then we're gonna defend ourselves. If you come in, we're warning you, we will blow up your ships. Now, if they got a warning, I don't have a problem with the bombings necessarily. If arresting them would have put people in danger, because justice, requires the force that is necessary to stop further harm. So if we could use less force, we should. If that is the force that is needed, then we should use that force. However, dialogue happens first. Say, don't do that, and then if they keep doing that, then we take defensive or even aggressive actions if those aggressive actions prevent further harm, right? But it shouldn't be like we shouldn't just drop a nuke on a country because there's a couple bad guys there, right? That's a complete exaggeration, but you get the point. So, justice. Well, we go in, we stop the guy. Potentially, that stops the next person in line from continuing to facilitate the drug trade, okay? Or potentially the other things that we might not want to happen that would put Americans in danger. So, is that justice? Well, it kind of seems that way. I don't know casualty numbers, but it seems like it's pretty minimum, right? They took out, they hit like surface-to-air missile locations and stuff like that. They basically made it safe for them to go in without doing excessive damage in the process. Although they did blow up, was it Chavez's tomb or whatever? Just that was kind of a unnecessary. Even I'd say funny because it's a bit absurd. It kind of made a political statement. Didn't actually harm anybody though, so I'm not too concerned about that. So justice seems to be served, right? And it's not that they didn't drop a bomb on him, so they could have done that. They could have, with way less effort, America had just shot a cruise missile and hit him in his sleep in bed. I'm sure that our country has that capability. That would be excessive force. It would be unnecessary to use that force if you can use less force. Now, did we put Americans potentially in danger? Well, you could say yes, but there were no wounds, there were no casualties, there was nothing like that. Americans went in there without a scratch and took him. What does that do? It makes America safer because we just showed this incredible display of force. Merciful force. We didn't blow him up. We went in and took him and arrested him. That's mercy. I always say there is no justice without mercy. They could have did way more force, which if they did, I would I would not be defending the same action. But I am defending this. Morally, I think you have stopped harm to Americans. And I'm sure there's probably other people hurt, especially in the China incident. The potential for China to take Taiwan and cause a lot of death and suffering in that process, maybe that potential is slightly less now, right? So that could be a positive. So it's not just Americans that are protected by this. Second thing is the display of force that we have showed the world, essentially, shows the world that, hey, we can do this to probably most of your country's leaders. We can do this to a lot more people than you think. We have capabilities that you would not have expected that we have. What does that mean? That means other countries who might do something to harm us are going to say, you know what? I don't think I'm going to do that because bad things can happen to me and there is nothing we can do to prevent it. Okay? And I wouldn't say bad things is morally bad. Justice might come to them for doing bad things. Okay? There is a difference. So the other potential here with this is that this also could prevent other countries from hurting other countries. Like, so let's say two countries are fighting and we say, knock that off. I'm going to use the Spider-Man quote. I know there's the meme now that, oh, the leftists like to say superheroes agree with them. That's not what I'm doing here, and I'm certainly not a leftist. So, we learn from stories, and Spider-Man's a good story. With great power comes great responsibility. I think if we have the capability to keep people from getting harmed in a way that doesn't put us in danger, then we should do that. So if two countries are fighting with each other, and like, let's say one country is just massacring a bunch of people, and we say, hey, you know what? We're going to use dialogue and say, don't do that. Oh, you're still doing that? We're going to escalate force, because more force is necessary for justice to be done. So we're going to say, hey, you know what? We're going to put sanctions on your country. That's not working. You know what? We're going to arrest you people. All right. And if that's not enough, there is worse things we can do. Say, hey, you're killing those people. We're going to make you stop with deadly force. That is a potential. I think the fact that Maduro was taken alive to stand trial is a show of mercy. Now, were there other casualties? Were there people there that got killed in the process? I don't know that. I'm going to assume that probably there were some people who were hurt in this. So this will kind of bring us into a little bit of a second topic that I'll riff on a little bit. So if you are aligning yourself with a group of people doing something morally wrong, then you are part of that system, all right? So we say Maduro's at the head of it, but everybody else underneath that allows for that to be facilitated are also facilitating the wrongs. They're not doing it as individuals, they're doing it as a group, a faction. Okay, so what that means is you can use force on the entire faction as necessary to make sure justice happens. Okay, that doesn't mean you go in there and just start blowing people up. It seems like the strikes were particular to target threats rather than just randomly attacking people who wouldn't pose a threat. It's not just like, oh, there's a barracks there, blow it up. Doesn't seem to be what happened. Instead, it was that is a threat to us. When we come to try to enact justice, they might try to hurt us with that, so we're shutting that down. Yeah, so that's how it works. Justice, I think, was served. I think it was done with mercy. I think that the show of force makes Americans and lots of other people in the world safer, because we have shown that we are capable of doing something like this. We've also potentially reduced the capabilities, even if a small amount, of other countries, for example, China, who might want to do harm to Taiwan. But and I don't know if drugs were going anywhere else out of Venezuela, which also, there could be other countries affected by that I'm not aware of. So generally, I say this is morally good. It was done in a prudent manner. It wasn't done in a merciless manner. It wasn't done malevolently. It was done with justice and with prudence. These are virtues as opposed to the alternative vices. So ultimately, I would say this is a moral thing that happened. Now, if politically you disagree with it, if you think there are ramifications for this that we haven't seen, that is a possibility and something that does factor in. Like, if we do this and then they retaliate in some way when Americans are killed because of that, then maybe it wasn't the way we should have done this. Maybe there are better ways to do that. Maybe it means we would have needed to use more force to prevent those things. But in this situation, it doesn't seem like Venezuela has the capability of doing things like that to any large scale. That they was already hurting people to begin with. I think it's more likely that the result is less people are harmed than will be harmed if any retaliation happens. On the plus side too, seemingly the election was stolen in Venezuela, and that Maduro was not considered the legitimate president. He was considered a dictator. So this also is good for the Venezuelans, who basically have a dictator ruling over them without their consent, essentially. So that's a whole other thing to get into. I don't want to do it in this video. I just want to talk about the actual capture of him. But that is another factor that potentially we have served justice for, I guess, a fourth reason. Now, is there going to be retaliation against Venezuelans because of this? Yes, there could be. But I also believe people are responsible for their own defense, which means the Venezuelans as well. If they're capable, they should defend themselves. A lot of them have fled to America when the election was taken by Maduro. And because, hey, if you can avoid a fight, you keep yourself safe. That's the minimum necessary force to keep yourself safe. You should do that if you can, okay? But, justice sometimes requires you take action to prevent further harm. And I think that's what happened here. So I'll stop rambling. If you like my videos, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and there will be more like this. Basically, I cover moral philosophy, at least my moral philosophy, and I try to apply that to topical situations. That way, it's not just a bunch of arbitrary ideas, but it's actual application of moral ideas. So sometimes I judge things harshly, sometimes I say, oh, actually, that wasn't too bad. I try to be fair with my assessments, though. If you don't think I was, tell me all about it in the comments, and, I'll try to read that. So, see you guys next time. I'm Joseph, the Moral Philosopher.